welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
Yeah, good, mate. How you going?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. It's quite a nice, cooling day. It's not too hot, not too cold. It's one of those Goldilocks days.
Yeah, it's been absolutely pissing down here for 2 days. So
Oh
first
well,
first big rains of the year.
yeah, yeah. You haven't had a lot over there.
No, real. I think one of the driest summers we've had in a long time, which is weird for a La Nina.
Yeah, we've been wet as all through summers, and it's extending now into autumn. But today's a good one.
Yeah,
Just a bit
take them
cooler.
when you get them, mate.
Absolutely, absolutely. So why don't we kick off with who you are and what you do and why you do what you do?
Sure. Yeah, I suppose I would be classed as a big wave photographer,
Mhm.
based in Western Australia. Yeah, I just chase the biggest swells we can possibly find and go capture them, and it's just been a ongoing obsession to just be amongst the surf and experience that and then capture it and try and turn it into fine art.
Sure, sure. What I'm interested in is that journey from where you started to take photos and then, as you say, turn it into fine art. Where did that sort of start to happen for you? Was it early on and you said, all right, this is what I want to do with my life? I want to create art. Or was it more, I'm just recording stuff, me and my mates out surfing, and then it changed somewhere along that line?
Yeah, I think it definitely started with just recording mates surfing, and I wanted to surf that wave, so I took shots of it to try and learn it a bit better. But
Sure.
I think somewhere along the lines it definitely changed quite profoundly. I don't know. It was an interesting thing. I'd never really considered myself a creative person, and never really. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting question because it's hard to explain the value of having a creative outlet in your life when you haven't had one before.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's quite profound the effect that it has on your psychology and the way that you view the world and perceive things. So it's for
Yeah.
me, it's definitely evolved into something that's far more selfish in a way.
Okay.
I do it because I love it, and I do it for what it does for me more than what I get back from it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
So what got you started, I guess, being a surfer, obviously getting out into the waves, and as you said, learning the waves, taking images or video of the wave, you can work out its shape and how it's going to react in different tides and different conditions. Is that really what it came down to when you first got started?
Yeah, I think I had a pretty big obsession with a wave called the right for years before I even went there. I've always been drawn to things that are just. I've always been drawn to like extreme weather, I
Yeah,
suppose
yeah,
is an easier way to put it. But before I moved down to Margs, when I went to the right, I'd been working up on boats in Exmouth for 10 years.
yeah,
So
right.
driving boats and doing ecotourism and whale sharking, and lived at the Monties for 4 or 5 years. And so I've always been on and around the water and quite comfortable in that environment. And then, yeah, when I come down here, it's like a very different landscape, a very different environment to be in. The ocean's a lot more rough and wild and raw, and you get that feeling of being alive when you're heading down into the Southern Ocean and going out in these big swells. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
there's part of it that's the addiction of being in that environment and the adrenaline that it gives, and then part of it's the addiction of wanting to capture the best image possible. So it's definitely a combination thing.
yeah. So how much of what you're doing now is in the water as opposed to on the water? And by that, you can take a shot off a boat, or you can take a shot actually being in the water, maybe on a boogie board or something like that. And how much are you doing of either, and what do you prefer doing?
Yeah, so I pretty much only shoot from a jet ski.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and I do that. I do have housings and things that I could get in the water for it, but it's not the most friendly environment out there
Yeah, yeah,
for starters. And then also, I like the flexibility of shooting without a housing and having full mobility over the lens, like racking the lens and changing settings, because like it is a very dynamic lighting environment out there. A lot of the time it's overcast and you're constantly shifting up and down in your settings and just doing a lot of different things and experimenting with different focal lengths. I think it's really cool to like rack it as it's coming towards you. But yeah, so I've pretty much only shot from the ski with the big wave stuff anyway. And yeah, just never use housing. So
Sure. I guess that transition and transcendation, sorry, I'm going to say that again, that transition into turning it into art, what was it that you think flipped that switch?
Photoshop for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought if I'm going to do photography stuff, I might as well learn, in my eyes, what the best program for photo editing was. And for me, that was Photoshop. I just spent years and years deep diving into that program, and it was in that process of learning what's possible to do to an image that I found something that was very uniquely my own in the way that I deliver my images. It was a byproduct of learning a program is what kind of created my artwork.
Yeah, cool. Do you set yourself goals and projects, or is it more you just go out and take what comes?
Yeah, I do like to set goals and projects. I do have a big project we're working on at the moment, which can't really talk too much about just yet.
Okay.
But yeah, that's going to be a multi-year project, and hoping to create something really stunning and beautiful out of it. And yeah, I usually have like stupid, crazy ideas, like trying to go film the ride at night with people surfing it with glow sticks attached to their back and things like that. But
Okay.
sometimes you just got to rein your stupid ideas in a little bit and say
Does sound a bit risky.
it's probably a bit dangerous. Yeah, I wanted to shoot it at full moon, under moonlight with the A7S III because it's so good in low light.
Yeah.
One of my mates said he will surf it on a full moon because as the moon rises, it'll be shining straight into the barrel.
Yeah.
So maybe that's one of those stupid ideas we can pull off. I think if you had it on like a really good, clean 10-foot day, it would be not too bad to do. But
Yeah. Okay. So are you a planner, or do you do spontaneous based on the weather conditions? You sitting there watching the forecast and saying, all right, well, there's definitely going to be swell coming. Let's go today. Or do you sit and plan and say, all right, well, seasonally it's going to be better in winter and so forth? How do you go about that thought process of, all right, time to go?
Yeah, there's an element of planning and an element of spontaneity in what we do, because like you have to be able to read chart. So you're looking at wave period, tide, wave direction, swell height, primary swell, secondary swell, wind speed, and rain. So you're looking at a lot of different variables when it comes to chasing these waves. And a wave like the right needs very specific things to be able to break, but there's a lot of other waves that kind of don't need as bigger conditions.
Yeah.
So you are planning a lot around like what the conditions are doing and how they're going to change and affect different things. But then at the same time, as being spontaneous, whereas if you get a nice clean 2.5 meter, 16 seconds, you can just say, okay, boom, we'll go down to this spot here and that'll be pumping on those conditions. So I think a lot of it's like learning the different waves and what they need, so that when you do get presented with those conditions, you can just jump in the car and go to that spot rather than spending ages searching around new waves and things like that, because that's what's fun, but it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, sure. In terms of your style, how would you describe it to somebody that hadn't seen it? Obviously waves, but what sort of waves, and how would you describe your style?
Dark and moody. Yeah, I really like to push images really dark and play with that balance between like light and dark, and give these waves the kind of, I don't know, like the raw power and intimidating kind of feeling that they give me when I'm out there.
Yeah.
Even though they are so beautiful, there's just so much energy and so much power and so much stuff attached to them that I just want to try and present them as something that's not just like this static, pretty thing. I want to Yeah, I think dark and moody would sum it up.
Fair enough. Fair enough. How has that developed since you started getting into Photoshop? Is that where you started and you just like that and kept going, or has it developed differently from where you were at the beginning?
It's a good question. I can't entirely remember because it was like 6, 7 years ago. I was
Sure.
in that process of kind of developing stuff. But yeah, I think it just naturally leaned that way
Yeah.
because a lot of the time when we go down there, like the water is black where we go
Yep.
because these waves are like really deep water around them. So it's like there's no beautiful turquoise beach sand water.
Yeah.
The only it is a really intimidating environment to be in. Yeah, I think I just naturally leaned that direction. But yeah.
Yeah. Cool. In terms of mastering that craft, both the in the field or in the water and your processing, how have you gone about educating yourself? Was that a process where you just sat and watched YouTube and taught yourself, or experimentation, or you've gone and done some formal education on it?
Yeah, a lot of YouTube, a lot of kind of workshops and reverse analyzing how people do their work and then just taking someone's image. A lot of the stuff that I actually learned was from portraiture.
Okay.
So yeah, I treat my landscape shots like it's a person and I'll put it through the same dodging and burning and sharpening and blurring and using a lot of blur and sharpening key focal points and highlights the same way you would like a face. Yeah, I'd say most of the stuff that I learned was actually through portraiture
Yeah.
rather than landscape stuff. I never really looked too much into landscape, and that's just because I figured that you can't hide any mistakes on a face. So I just, yeah, and I've never really felt super comfortable shooting portraiture, which means it's like something that I definitely lack in skill.
Yeah.
What about you?
Ah, I've basically taught myself of lots of mistakes.
Yeah,
Lots of YouTube videos. In terms of the processing, I find there's probably three or four that are really good for that sort of thing. Flern, not bad.
yeah, that website's awesome, I reckon. Eh?
Yeah, F64 Academy. Mark Denny does a fantastic job. His depth of knowledge is absolutely phenomenal, particularly around how Photoshop treats color at a pixel by pixel level. And yeah, so I've learned a hell of a lot from those sorts of things, but a lot of it is really stumbling through developing my own sort of style and developing my own workflows around picking bits and pieces out of other people's workflows or picking bits and pieces out of some of those tutorials I've watched. And I'm always watching them for new and different techniques, and also watching what's going on around Photoshop itself and the new features that are coming out and trying them out and just saying, okay, what does this do? And if I put this slider, most of my editing is fairly subtle slider movements. There's not a lot of extremes. It's not saturation up to 100. You know?
Yeah, it's interesting though. Like all the stuff that changes. Like Photoshop's such a deep and complex program. You can do anything in it, and
Pretty
that's
much, yeah.
part of the beauty of it, but also part of the problem of it.
Yeah, there's always 20 ways of doing the same thing.
Exactly right. Yeah. So I think it's finding out like how deep you need to scratch the surface on that thing, and then finding out what works for you, and then
Yeah.
sticking with that, but then also not being afraid to do new things. Like I just did an edit the other day where I was like, I just want a little bit more of a glitch going on around the kind of periphery of this image. So I duplicated the layer, put the opacity to 50%, and then shifted it off by about
Yeah.
10 pixels or something, and then removed it from the center. And it just created a nice little soft little distortion field around the focal point, which kind of helps. But
Yeah, cool.
yeah.
I find one of the things that I do now that I didn't do a lot before with black and white, where I've taken the shot in color, which is standard for me. I do very occasionally switch it to monochrome, but I've found that I've got more control in Photoshop if I've got the color information.
Oh,
And then
totally, yeah.
using a gradient map, a black and white gradient map, to turn it into black and white, and then using color balance, the HSL sliders, and what's the other one? Selective color. And the control you can get over that, so you can define how much cyan is in your reds, for example, or how much magenta is in your reds. And yeah, using the sliders there, and when you see that actually happening to a black and white image, it changes it up from just clicking the black and white button to turn it into a monochrome version of the colors that are there. And yeah, it's just an interesting, different way of doing it. And I've found that giving myself a lot more of that control over how the light actually works within that mono image compared to the color one really makes a difference to how it looks.
That's that complex relationship between saturation and luminosity.
Yeah. But even also the volume of different colors within that pixel, within those pixels, the reds and even down to the neutrals and the blacks and whites, you can actually define more yellow, magenta or cyan or black into those using the selective color sliders, using the gradient map, which you can't do if you've turned it into black and white straight out of the box. You just push the black and white button. It doesn't let you do that.
Yeah, I just think it's almost a waste doing that, because you're just giving away data. You're giving away information. I think when you're editing, you want to be editing with the most amount of information you possibly can at the time, and that is a color image, really.
Absolutely. What about the camera craft itself? Where did you pick that up?
Like how to work them?
Yeah. where to point them? that's a big thing that a lot of people miss out on early on. Something that you learn over time is composition and how to frame up an image and how to use the right focal length. You talked about that a little bit. They're the camera craft things that I think are really important. Getting the right shutter speed, the right focal length, and the right composition together all in one image. It's not as easy as some people might make out, and you can't do all of that on order.
Yeah, I suppose like very early on, I suppose big wave surf photography and surf photography in general, it's a unique sphere to operate in because of the compositional factors. Like that, you have opportunities to create compositions, but you're really working with such like a dynamic thing.
Yeah, everything's moving all at once.
Yeah, so you don't really have. It's not. I'm looking at your shots on your website now, where you've got leading lines going into a swimming pool and the lights catching the rail, and you've got this beautiful juxtaposition between warm and cool colors and all this stuff. That's a dynamic position that you've gone to this scene and scoped out the environment and looked for these things to lead the eye in a direction, and very intentional about the way that you've done everything. But with surf, you just get there and you see a wave coming, you just like point and just hold down, shoot. And the only thing that you really have power over controlling, not the only thing, but it's your position relative to where the light's coming in.
Yeah.
And then their focal length. So there's smaller factors to worry about. But yeah, I suppose with learning, I just looked at the cameras as it's a machine, it's a tool, it's something that has very clear boundaries and limitations to what it can do. And well, I think when you strip the camera of its mystical kind of personality, so to speak, it becomes something that's a little bit easier to understand. And shutter speed, ISO, and aperture.
Sure.
It's this little triangle of things, and depending on stylistically what you want, you lean more in one direction or the other. So I think, yeah, I just wrapped my head around that and moved on. Really, it's you just dial in the best settings for the environment that you're in, and for surf, it's all about shutter speed, really.
Yeah. So are you leaving the ISO and aperture up to the camera, and you focusing on the shutter speed and leaving everything else up to the camera, or are you putting a little bit of control around the other two as well?
No, I'll shoot full manual because aperture you want to be shooting up around f11 to f8.
Yep.
Shutter speed, I'm typically shooting 1/1200th or
Okay.
higher.
Yeah.
I've been shooting, like, my new favorite lens to shoot surf is the 200 to 600.
Yeah.
And shooting like a lot more tighter detailed stuff. So it's fun to
Deeper
play around with.
into the wave. Yeah.
Yeah. I think like ISOs, it used to be a big thing when I was shooting on shit cameras, but
Yeah, well, it
now that
used
you're
to be a
doing,
barrier. You got
yeah,
over 1,000 ISO, and it just looked a mess.
yeah. But with the modern day cameras, it's,
Yeah,
you know, the A7S3, you're shooting up around 10,000 on that thing. It's still clean as. So
yeah.
I don't really pay attention to where that's sitting. I just make sure I know I've got enough exposure.
Yeah,
Based on the two most important factors for me are capturing the motion in still, so over 1,000 of a second, and then making sure I've got enough focal detail in the image and sharpness, which is usually mid-range for aperture anyway.
yeah. So you're doing this full time, or is this a side gig or a hobby? What is it in your life?
It's a lot of things. Takes up a lot of time. Yeah, I've started with a hobby, switched it to a full-time thing for a little while, and then now I've switched back to it being a part-time thing.
Yeah, right.
And I played around in the commercial field a bit and shooting weddings and product photography and all that kind of stuff. And
Sure.
for me, it just stripped the soul out of why I like doing this stuff. I really love it. Like I said, it's almost a selfish endeavor for me because I like it for what editing does for me mentally, and I don't get that same feeling if I'm editing photos of a cappuccino. So, yeah, I like the freedom that it gives me to not be pursuing this full time at the moment. But yeah, that is the dream eventually.
So how are you balancing your time with work and with earning a living and your passion?
I just found a really cool boss that that understands what I do and why I do it and how important it is. I'll do 3 days a week with him.
Yeah.
And he's a legend. I can call him up tomorrow. I'm supposed to be working and just say, look, this swell, I'm not coming. And he'll be like, have fun. So I think that's important for me, is having that flexibility and freedom to be able to do trips, because a lot of it does come down to really late last minute calls with swell.
Yeah.
It depends on how BOM are going with their forecasting. Sometimes they're so on point that you can predict it a week out, but a lot of the time it's 2 days out you make a call.
Yeah. Is the right your favourite location? Is that the pinnacle, or are there other places out there that you're still searching for?
There's always more. Yeah, I think part of the whole sphere of this world to operate in is the right is such a impressive location to see when it's big and proper and doing its thing, and you're seeing the best in the world come and surf it and throw themselves into this monster. But yeah, there's definitely more out there to be found.
Have you done much elsewhere around the world, or are you been strictly West Coast? And
yeah, pretty much only Southwest Australia, because it's fortunate what kind of environment we find ourselves in here. There's a lot of big evil stuff.
yeah. Yeah, you got the Southern Ocean washing past, so that tends to have a bit of an impact, because between you and, I think, South Africa is a bit north of Perth from the tip of Cape Town, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you basically got nothing between you and the east coast of South America. That little tip of Tierra del Fuego hanging down the bottom there. So that's a lot of ocean to gather up some energy and move around that bottom part of the world.
Oh, totally, man. Some of the storms you roll through are very scary. But yeah, that's what gets us excited.
Yeah, definitely. So what are your favourite conditions? Storm or a little bit more moderate?
Oh, man, that's tricky. I love it when it's rough. It really doesn't matter with these waves if the ocean's rough. There's so much water being moved around that they just pull themselves clean regardless of the conditions. You get this like really iridescent blue in these waves when they break.
Yeah.
And when it's really dark, that proper full cloud overcast, that kind of beautiful dark light that you get from that,
Yeah.
that blue is probably the most iridescent in those conditions.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So that blue is like spend your life chasing that color. It's crazy. It's just such a weird color.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. The sky has a grey blue to it, but the water just goes really iridescent, sort of almost tinging on cyan and green, but it's still very much a blue.
Yeah, it's like this crazy argon color or something, like an argon gas, or it's almost like bioluminescent in the way that it presents. It's quite unique.
What's your most memorable experience?
Memorable in the way that I wish we stayed longer was the really psycho day we went out there.
Yeah.
But it was just big. It was psycho and not particularly safe conditions. And went out with a few other skis and they all peeled out. And me and another mate were out there and he was sitting out the back kind of ghosting waves on the ski, just seeing how big they were. And I was sitting in the channel shooting and I thought he was going to peel out and go. And it just wasn't an ocean condition that you wanted to be stuck out there on your own in. So I packed up all the gear and left. But yeah, that was pretty memorable. It's the biggest waves I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Are
we talking 10, 15 metre, bigger than that?
Oh, yeah, way bigger. Yeah. It was like, I don't know. It's so hard to, because no one was on it, it's hard to put it in scale for size, but they're like where people sit on their jet skis at the right, it was breaking out there and like having a roll, like a chip in.
Yep.
And then breaking on the main peak. But I think if it had a slightly smaller period and a higher tide, it would have really handled it. But just crazy amounts of water moving around.
Yeah.
But it was also like 30 knot on shores.
Wow.
I think it was like a 9 meter swell with a 7 meter seas or something. I don't know. It was big.
Most boaties would be in safe harbour in those sorts of conditions, or wanting to be, if they weren't. What is it that makes you go out in conditions like that? Is it purely the adrenaline, or is it really the desire to capture something that's very unique?
I think more than anything, it's the curiosity of it, because like all these waves are like, they have personalities. They're like, you treat them like people. It's like all the different conditions that hit the wave is like different moods of that person, and you get to know them, and you're just curious about what do they look like when they're pissed off. And this was one of those conditions. Let's go see this thing when it's really fucking angry. It was big. But I think like curiosity. But like that day boarded on stupid. If one of us had broken down, don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah.
Or if you got left behind or something like that, you're not swimming in those. You're not making it to shore.
So what are you doing around safety in those sorts of situations? Have you got emergency beacons? Have you got life jackets on? What is it that you're doing to try and make sure that you do come back alive?
Yeah, like I said, I've had 10 years commercial experience driving boats and being on the ocean. I've been in some really shit situations in my commercial career. So I've seen how quickly things deteriorate and can get turn pretty bad real quick.
Yeah.
But I suppose it's tricky out there because like the Department of Transport want you to wear the PFD type 1 kind of pool ones, but they're just useless in that environment. They'll just get ripped straight off you or popped or something. So we do wear big wave inflation vests, which have pool canisters as well. So we'll wear them. You always wear hard foam to make sure if you are knocked unconscious, you still float. Wetsuits, Always, if it's not psycho, I'll go out of mine. But if it's bad conditions or you're going really far or whatever, then try and take 2 skis. But yeah, EPIRBs and things like that. That day, I really don't think that people would have been able to come out in a boat to get us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was proper bad.
I guess that leads me to the question, what's the practice of photography taught you about nature?
I just think just like a deeper appreciation of it. So
Yeah.
much stuff happens really fast. It's a wave breaking is over really fast. Like a bird taking off is over really fast. Like a kingfisher or an osprey, like diving for its food. Like it almost happens too fast to even perceive what's going on.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think there's so much like hidden beauty behind what's happening all around us, like really fast. So if you can just capture frames of it or capture it in slow motion and slow it down and really appreciate the complexity of what is happening in nature, it's just astonishing, like what happens there.
Yeah, definitely.
Even in abstract things, like you see whitewater, like a bit. I love your shots. You've got the beautiful slow motion shutter speed with rocks and things like that. You film that in slow motion and look at the micro details of it.
Yeah.
There's just a lot going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about you?
For me, I guess it's taught me to appreciate what's around us, and it's taught me that it's certainly taught me to pay more attention to what's going on in the environment. One of the things that I've, really started to do a lot more, I started out doing that sort of grand landscape, got to get the sky and the sea or whatever it is, got to get everything into the one shot, is to pare down and even down to focusing at things at my feet, take more notice of those things. Just, the patterns of cracks in a rock, for example, I could spend an hour and a half just looking around that and trying to work an image out of that. And that's something that, had I not been doing photography, I probably wouldn't have spent. I used to do a bit of rock hopping as a kid, but that was more, oh yeah, you're looking for crabs or fish or octopus or whatever in a rock pool. This is a different sort of rock hopping and a different sort of, even down to, if I'm in a forest, I'm looking at patterns in the bark on the trees and the moss and fungi and all those sorts of things, rather than necessarily that whole. So it's taught me to focus down on some of those little details in a big way.
That's so true, eh? Like I think that with editing as well, and I'm always looking for things that you can remove. Yeah, what can I remove from this image?
Yeah.
The more complex an image is, the more it's like visually stunning to look at straight away, but over time it's like almost hard to look at.
Yeah, I call it a fatiguing effect that they can have, some of those images you look at. And if you look at too many of them as well, and with social media today, flicking through stunning grand landscapes, nothing wrong with the images at all, but you see too many of them sometimes, and it's, I want to see something a bit different.
Yeah, and that is that. Yeah, I was looking at, it was on your Instagram or your website. There was a cool shot of a little rock crack, and I was like, I love that it's like there's enough empty space in there for the viewer to have their own ideas about it.
Yeah.
It's like
And
you're not being told.
That's the key thing, is you're trying to get people to feel something and look at it and for me, getting people to look at their world a different way is a big part of it.
Yeah, for sure. There's me dog.
Do you do much printing of your work, or?
Shut up in a minute.
Yeah, she's right. I can barely hear
her. Yeah, I did get into printing. Again, one of them things I like to have control over the outcome of what the prints look like. So I worked super closely with a dude in Perth who's just obsessed with quality. So I pretty much only used him for printing, and then I ended up buying the Canon Pro 1000 A2 printer just to be able to print like the smaller stuff at home. But yeah, I just haven't pushed it that hard. I find it like it's annoying, because it's like photography is designed to be viewed in a print medium, and
Definitely.
that's where it shines the most. But then also it's like quite tricky to. I haven't found a lab that's good enough to outsource all of that work to and
Yeah.
trust that it's like the same quality to what I want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't really pursued it. I randomly just give away a heap of prints just because I'm like, I just want my art to be enjoyed by people. I don't. It's never really been about everything for me. But yeah.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. How do you deal with creative blocks and challenges? What strategies do you use to stay inspired and engaged?
Scotch.
Okay, that's not a bad remedy. Depends on who makes it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like I do because like so much of the photography side of things for me is about editing. It's not like the shooting stuff I love doing because it's I almost don't find like when I'm doing trips away, I'm so excited about what the conditions are going to be like, what the swell's going to be like. Is it going to be big? Is it low tide? There's so many things to be excited about. And then when you're out there, even if it's shit, it's still epic because you're surrounded by your friends that you don't see that often, and
Yeah,
you're
right.
out in this like super remote place, like miles from shore, and there's so much to be stoked about, regardless of whether the waves are good or not. So
Yeah,
that side of it is always fun. You never have a creative block out there because you're stoked anyway. But then
yeah,
when you get home, yeah, I don't know. I think if I'm not feeling a creative mood, I'll just kick back at night and have a drink and just for me, like so much of it about is about experimenting, like you were saying before.
yeah.
You just if you're not feeling creative, then try something different. That's it. And then, sure enough, put your headphones on, have a nice little drink, start messing around with a shot, and 20 minutes later, it's been 4 hours. So,
I know that feeling.
yeah,
So
that's good.
what are you doing when you get home from a trip? Are you straight into the editing, or do you leave them for a bit and let them stew?
Yeah, I'm a fan of the stewing technique. I really like to detach from the experience
Yeah,
properly and fully before I view the images. Because like I'll have a flick through them and in the car park and things like that, but you never really know what's good on the back of the screen. But yeah, we'll usually have like a decompression session with the boys after and flick through the shots and see who got the biggest barrel and have a laugh about that. But yeah, then when I get home, I'll just do a data dump onto a hard drive and walk away for a week or so.
yeah,
But yeah, it's weird with Surf A because you'll look at the catalog and then one, depending on what mood you're in, you'll pick out one or two images that you think are great and you edit those up and they become images. And then you look back 6 months or a year later and find two different ones that
yeah.
you think are
Equally
great.
as good, if not better. Yeah,
Yeah. But there's really not that many from each session that you're going to turn into printable art, I'd say.
yeah. No, fair enough. Fair enough. What do you see as being the biggest challenge facing photography right now?
Video.
Okay.
Yeah. I think social media is obviously like a big driver of market demand. And
Yeah.
it used to be that product photography was like a big thing. And I think a lot of people used to make a lot of money from doing that. And I think the trends on social media are what lead the market push in different directions, I feel.
Yeah.
I don't particularly see it as a negative. I just think it's a challenge for it because like it used to be that like a photographer was a photographer and you took photos and it's like it feels like the industry's shifted or pivoted and it's almost a prerequisite that you have to be able to do video and stuff now as well.
Yeah. Definitely.
But I think that's an opportunity more than a hindrance. And it's an opportunity to deepen a skill set and become a storyteller. And like photo is great for certain things, and a video is great for other things.
Yeah. Cool. What about the future of photography? Where do you see the industry, but also the art form going?
It's never going to stop. And everything that's happening with AI now, I think we're going to see a flood of images created by AI that will, for a very brief period of time, depreciate photography as an asset.
Yep.
And then over the long forecast, I'd say photography will come back around as an even stronger asset because it is something that's real.
Yeah.
And it's capturing real life. But I feel AI and everything digital, it's like things come in trends and it's new and exciting. It's the new fad, and people will just deep dive into that for 6 months to 3 years, and then they'll switch back to what's real. And I think it'll have a resurgence.
I think I've said this before, that I think there's a risk in that commercial space, particularly product and even to a certain extent model photography, where creative directors can basically type in the words that they want and come up with an image without paying anyone, And I know if I was a creative director and I didn't have to pay someone to do all the other bits and pieces, I'd probably do that myself.
Yeah, I suppose like on that trend though, there's different scales to commercial work. There's the mum and pop businesses that maybe don't have a budget for photography. Found that a lot with doing commercial stuff, is like targeting that low end of people. There's always a tension in that relationship because it's job. You need to be paid for what you do. But
yep,
those AI tools could be incredible for the higher end budget stuff, where they'll use the word prompts to spit you out an image and say, I want you to recreate something similar to this.
Yeah.
Which is such like a more clear creative brief as an artist to take away and say, okay, well, to plan this shot, I need X, Y, and Z to happen. And instead of just like words on a paper, because it used to be like grabbing images as on a sand dune and a model and a bottle of gin and doing these things. But yeah, you can use AI to create really accurate, concise, creative briefs, then it could be cool.
Yeah. I can see using AI to actually create entire personalized and like down to individuals campaigns where they transition over time based on your reaction to those images, where the images actually will evolve and change over time because there's an AI bot sitting there watching where your eye goes and then tweaking that and saying, okay, we spent more time in that area, so we'll enhance or change the lighting on that and make that something a little bit more about what that person particularly wants. So I can see that, because that becomes very low cost for at the moment, personalisation, which has always been a goal of the advertising industry, that ability to personalise and add to somebody. You're still getting content which is generic. But when you can actually personalise the content to the person, that then changes the game advertising wise. I can see it being far more manipulative than it's ever been too. And it's pretty manipulative now. But anyway, that's my evil empire view of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I sit more in camp optimist, but like I'm detached from that shit. I don't watch commercial TV. I don't listen to the radio.
The places where they can't do it is travel and real estate, those sorts of things, property shots. You can't really say, all right, this is an AI mock-up of what your room might look like. they've got to show you what your room's going to look like. Otherwise, people are going to, walk away from the product. And so those sorts of things, I think there's less potential for AI to creep into. But some of the other, that more sort of product driven, as you say, the model and the sand dune and the gin bottle, being able to blend all of that together and have that done, an entire creative brief fulfilled without having to pay anyone. I can see advertising agencies and even the end client jumping on board with that and doing it themselves.
That's why I think there'll be a separation in the industry from weeding out potentially the work that people don't maybe enjoy doing anyway.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about when you were talking about doing your landscape photography and looking for like small details and cracks in rocks and things like that. And there's something very tangible about the way that you go out into the environment.
Yeah, for me, it's the experience in as much as the art as the end product.
Yeah, but like the way that you're like going into the environment, and I'm looking at your website at the moment, your waterfall shots. It's like you could tell an AI to create something like that,
Oh,
but
absolutely. Yeah.
they're not going to create. Try and tell an AI to create like a beautiful rock with a crack in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like they might do it. I don't know. I've never tried it, but I think
Yeah.
there's something beautiful about that intention when you go out and shoot it, and I think that's what's going to come back around in the scheme of things, is like that personalization between fine art, and when you find an artist that you like it's getting to know them and who they are, how they think, how they see the world, and everything you were talking about before. And I think that stuff's going to come back around in what's valuable once all the hype of this shit kind of washes over.
I think you're right in a lot of ways. The one area that worries me slightly is documentary photography, like reportage,
Yeah,
and how that, particularly for political or social engineering desires of certain people, you could end up with very distorted news reportage, because here's an image of Trump or our Prime Minister Albo doing something that they definitely didn't do, but here's an image and it's a photo. So how do you avoid that, and how do you find what's true and what's not in amongst the AI stuff that I think will happen? I just think either lazy reporters or newspaper people, or people with slightly less friendly views to other people might want to convey a certain message.
yeah. I think like that industry's squirrely at the best of times
Oh,
now.
definitely, yeah.
It's only going to get worse for
It,
sure.
it's not much better now, but they're
Yeah.
usually only using words for that. They're not necessarily. But that said, there are deep fake images out there, and
Oh man, they're rampant out there. I think.
yeah.
I don't know whether there'll be like metadata, an AI that you can use to scan for metadata and images, and you determine whether it's real or fake or something like that. Because there's these AIs that are creating stuff. Surely they're leaving digital signatures.
There's got to be a
Or,
signature somewhere in there. Yeah.
yeah, but that comes back to people's own biases and whatever, and whether they can be bothered figuring out
Well,
what's
this is
true
it.
or not true.
There's a lot of people that suck up either far left or far right media and believe it. And we've through a few years of people getting very polarized views and very interesting disinformation that they latch hold of, and that's the truth.
Yeah, that was comical in a lot of ways to see how much it just fell apart real quick. But yeah, it's that my concern is all around that kind of stuff, and that's why you think about it, and man, it's not positive, is it?
It could be used very negatively, and that's the hope, is that it doesn't. But knowing people, I know it will, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's almost 100% certainty, which sucks, but that's just the way that people are inclined. That's the way that they're created, and
That's it. That's exactly it.
we're a deeply flawed species.
Very much.
Yeah.
Then you've got the risk of the Matrix taking over and being the dominant species, the AI itself. There's a lot of people that are worried about that.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people saying that Chat GTP
There's already
4
sentient, yeah.
is already, it's like how I was listening to an interesting one the other day. They were talking about this, was on Lex Friedman's podcast, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's just like you wouldn't know, would you? And he was
Well,
trying to give the analogy.
that's the
It's like
thing, you know.
yeah, the
How
AI
would
is
you
like
know?
the AI is smarter than us in every way. It's faster than us every way, and you just wouldn't know if it was sentient. It's not going to tell you it is, because it would know that we're dumb monkeys and we just would want to put it back in a box. But
That's it.
yeah, it's terrifying. It's exciting, and it's a cool, unique time to be living through a lot of this stuff.
Absolutely.
That's it. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I think you see some people just go straight off the deep end with a lot of that stuff, and you're like,
Oh yeah.
I think you need to get out and look at a rainbow or a tree or something.
Absolutely. It's one of the reasons why I do what I do.
Reminded about what's cool.
Get out there and look at nature and not worry about all of that crap that goes.
Oh, mate, through all that COVID stuff, I just wanted to run to the farm and go live off the land. And yeah, I was close to doing it, but didn't quite get there.
Talking about that, what do you like to do when you're not out shooting?
Yeah, hunting.
Yeah,
okay. I love hunting, compound bows, and fishing, spear fishing, free diving. Just I love catching my own food. It's probably a big thing, and I love teaching people how to do that as well, and opening them up to the environment and teaching them how to catch their own food. And I just love exploring. Really, love just the wild, roughing it, and going on a holiday to a flash hotel. Just to me sounds boring.
Fair enough.
Yeah. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm mostly doing podcasts when I'm not doing photography myself.
Yeah.
That and just trying to work on the commercial side of the business, trying to get as much money in it as I can. But it's not an easy thing to do, but yeah, it's going okay so far.
How do you find your podcast overall since you've started? You've obviously done quite a few episodes now, and like I've always been curious about people and the kind of growth curve they go on from starting one to the point where you're at now, where you've got a few behind you. And that's a lot of conversations to have had with people.
It is, and I look back and it doesn't feel like that many, but it also does when I look back and go, wow, I mean, you're number 94 or 95, I'm sorry, I'm not sure, I've lost count. But I guess in terms of the growth curve, I'm learning a hell of a lot in these conversations, not just about the people that I'm talking to, but about how they do things and why they do things. And in a way, that's become the main focus of what I'm asking people is, why do you do this? This weird thing that we all get out and do as photographers, get out into nature and take photos. So for me, that why is really the important thing. But I've also learned quite a lot about myself in terms of, and changed quite a lot about how I think about things through some of these conversations. So for me, it's been an absolutely fantastic experience. And for the moment, I certainly can't see myself stopping for ages. It's just something, I know some people, they kick into things and it's of interest for a few weeks or a few months or maybe a year, but then they give it up. I just can't see myself doing that at the moment. It's something that I'm loving and I'm passionate about almost as much as my photography.
Yeah, I think you'd have to really, like, it's an interesting position to put yourself in, because like you'd have the whole guest, how you're choosing your guest things, and like with photography, I suppose you're at less risk of entering into controversial topics or polarizing topics or even opposing topics that from the stuff that you might believe. But being the kind of host on it and being privy to a lot of those conversations, I think you'd be a good lesson in patience. Or
I've got to be honest, I haven't found too many people that have been overly controversial, which probably impacts the number of people that will sit and listen to things because the controversy is what gets a lot of people off. But for me, I'm not about trying to generate it either. It doesn't interest me trying to generate controversy when it isn't there. And if somebody says something that sort of goes against what I believe, well, that's their opinion, and it's up to them to be able to reconcile that against the rest of their life. Not for me to tell them that they're wrong, without trying to cause controversy for controversy's sake. Your comments about going out and hunting, I know my daughter, if she was listening to this, which she doesn't, I hope. It's too daggy, it's dad. She's vegetarian, really animal conscious and all the rest of that. She'd absolutely hate the fact that you go out and hunt and kill animals for food. Me personally, that's what you do. That's up to you. But some people are going to listen to it and go, "Oh my God, he's a horrible person." I don't think that personally, but
yeah, it's an interesting one because it's been a big part of my life growing up, and it is. I do run into people like that have this really polarizing opinion about stuff, and that's cool.
That's it. You're allowed to have a different opinion, and that's okay. And that's the way I treat my guests, is that if they have an opinion that differs to mine, so be it. It's not for me to tell them they're wrong.
Yeah. No, that's cool, man.
Unless one came on, but then again, I wouldn't release one. If somebody came on and they were a neo-Nazi and carrying on like a pork chop about something like that, I'd stop the conversation because I don't want to talk to someone like that, and I'd never release it, so no one would ever know.
I've always wondered that. With the field that you're in, is definitely like you're attracting people that are like-minded, people like Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan and things like that.
Oh yeah.
A range of guests.
They can have their podcast in the way that they want. That's fine,
Yeah, no, it's cool. I've always been curious to ask someone.
I'm just about out of questions, but I've got a couple more for you. Have you got any photographers that you think I should be talking to on the podcast? Some that'll give me some controversy.
Yeah, I don't know. It's obviously the big wave crew that around me. You got Kim Feast and Andrew Seamark, and I don't know. I'm not really that hooked into the photography world about. I get to know people based on my interactions with them, and
sure,
if they've done the most incredible work in the world, but then they're a dickhead, I just don't really have much time for that. But there's a lot of crew. Phil from Perth, Philly, he's a really good fella. I think people that have had different kind of, I reckon Phil would be interesting to talk to.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. My last question is one that I've been trying to get to the bottom of for all photographers. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Of course. It's not even a question. I don't know. I just don't see how this is still a debate in 2020.
Some people are dead against it.
See, I can understand that people maybe don't like me hunting and catching my own food. And pineapple belongs on pizza. It's
fair enough.
So what about you? Are you a pineapple?
I'm neutral. If it's there, I'll eat it. If it's not there, I don't order it on my pizzas. I don't normally order pineapple, but if it's there and the pizza needs eating, I'm eating it.
That passes too, but pineapple improves the pizza.
Fair enough. All right. Well, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you today, Ren, and finding out a lot more about you. Where can people find your work?
Cheers, mate. Yeah, Instagram. Yeah, Twitter. I don't know. Instagram's probably the main one, just Ren McGann. Yeah.
No worries. Thanks again, mate.
Cheers, great. Legend.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.